but I'm delighted to welcome Islamiat Raji, who is a young researcher, and she is passionate about biodiversity conservation and the relationship people have with their environment. She's got a PhD in Ecological Sciences, which she finished in 2021. And she had a research focus on land use change in frugivore interactions across the urban forest landscape of the University of KwaZulu-Natal under the supervision of internationally renowned Professor Colleen Downs. She also has a master's in conservation biology, and she might be telling you later, but she's also just got a postdoc at Queen's University as well, which is very exciting. And she has also worked and volunteered for several NGOs and universities as an assistant lecturer, a bird bander. She's done citizen science research and has worked as a teaching assistant. Her research interests include, but are not limited to Frugivore Seed Dispersal, plant ecology and taxonomy, avian ecology, ecosystem services, citizen science, and biodiversity conservation. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Raji. We can see your screen. It's now full screen now. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I muted everybody, so you might, you just need to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now, please?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry for that. So thank you so much, Rachel, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. Like Rachel has said, I will be presenting some of my PhD findings on effect of land use changes on the distribution and use of ficus species by frugivores in the urban mosaic landscape of Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. And this project or research is being supervised by Professor Colleen Downs, University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So like Rachel said, I am Raji Islamiat Abidemi. I had my bachelor's degree in Forestry and Wildlife Management from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria, and my master's degree in Conservation Biology from AP Leventis Ornithological Research Institute, Nigeria also, where I carried out research on Frugivore Seed Dispersals, the interaction between mosquitoes and birds. And during this master's program, I fell in love with bats because of the frugivore bats. I realized that frugivore bats helps in seed dispersals and ecosystem services. So since then, I started looking for opportunities to learn about bats and to work with people in bat field. So fortunately for me, during my PhD, I got to I got an invite to join the young and talented bat researcher in Kenya, where we were taught bats and the ecological function, the diversity and ecosystem services bats offered to us. So I got my PhD degree from University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Sorry, I don't know what's happening. Oh God. Sorry, my laptop is misbehaving. I'm so sorry for that. So I got my PhD degree from University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa last year, and I'm presently researching on bird diversity using community science method. Okay, I think I'm fine now. I'm so sorry, I don't know what's happening. So sorry.
Couldn't possibly maybe be on a timer. If it keeps doing that, you can maybe just do it like this rather than full screen, but it looks almost like it's on a
timer. Is it okay like this?
Yeah, now we can see it fine, no problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry for that. So presently I'm postdocing with Queen's University under the supervision of Professor Francis Bonia, and we are researching on bird diversity using community science and citizen science method. So we have collaborators with different from different countries, Kenya, Brazil, and Senegal. So our collaborators help with the use of audio recorder help us collect data, bird data from different locations, and we are using that to predict land use changes and urbanization effect on bird diversity. So straight to my presentation. So land use changes and its effect on ficus species distribution. For my PhD, like I said earlier, I researched on the effect of land use changes on ficus distribution and Fig-frugivore interaction. Land use changes is one of the greatest threats to biodiversity, as we all know. Over the years, there have been changes from land use effects, urbanization, climate change, and these changes has potentially reduced the capacity of ecosystem to sustain food production for vertebrates, in which frugivores are one of them. So looking at the diverse ecosystem services we get from frugivores, before the research commenced, I carried out a systematic review on ficus frugivore interaction in urban area, Durban to be precise. So using systematically, I researched I searched for studies on fig distribution and on Fig-frugivore interaction, then look at the effect of land use changes. So we realized 295 papers and 70 papers meet our criteria. So from that, 12 fig species were recorded from 30 African countries, which represent 56% of African continent. So looking at this paper, 63 species were recorded from Cameroon, which is the highest species recorded that has been published in papers. And from East Africa has the highest in total, which is 96 ficus species. So what we wanted to achieve from this research is to see how fig, because when you look at ficus species, I'm sorry, I'm a bit disorganized now, maybe because of what happened. We realize that ficus species occupies diverse habitats and they produce large number of food crops. I mean, they produce large number of fruits per year, and their fruit is acidinal. They produce fruit all year round. So they're producing fruit all year round means that they will be available in terms of fruit scarcity for frugivores and other vertebrates. So if we have this kind of species that are available all year round, then they will be very important to frugivores. And when we look at research confirmed that ficus species are keystone species because of these their characteristics of producing fruit all year round. So we had to look at what has been done on fig and their interaction with frugivores. And that was what I was trying to say earlier, that we realized that in research has only recorded in Africa, there's only 70 papers that met our criteria and which have recorded the fig-frugivore interactions and their impact, or the impact of land use changes on them. So after the review, we started our research and we look at the fruiting phenology and diversity of native ficus species in urban forest mosaic. We place articles in local newspapers and in online platforms, which is Facebook and WhatsApp. And we also use conservancy websites to obtain information from local inhabitants in our study area. So we realized that various ficus species in urban areas are being planted, and some, from the information we gathered, some are not being planted, but majority of them are being planted. And most abundantly are natalensis, Ficus succumarus, and Ficus trichopoda. And these species attract a lot of frugivores, which include birds, bats, and monkeys. And this is because they fruit, like I said earlier, they fruit all year round, and they fruit all year round. They fruit all year round. And when you look at this circular diagram, you realize that for every month, there's always at least one ficus species that fruits. And being available for frugivores make them to be a keystone species and important. So after looking at the fruiting phenology, which shows that ficus species are available all year round and they attract frugivores, we look at the fruit-frugivore interaction, and we realize that they are both mutually beneficial, because ficus species are available for frugivores, and frugivores helps in dispersal of these ficus species and also help to remove the pulp. They help to improve seed germination and emergency, and frugivores feeding on ficus species help to break seed dormancy and thereby enhance population maintenance and forest restoration. Because when either bats, monkeys, or birds takes fig fruits, they take it from their mother plant to further place, which germinates and helps in restoration, in forest restoration. Then we assess the effect of ingestion of ficus fruits by avian frugivores. We compared this ingestion with manually depulped fruits and whole fruits. Then we also look at the seedling emergence and cumulative germination of 3 ficus species, which is Ficus natalensis, lutea, and so. So the aim of this project is to investigate the role of bird species in dispersing and germinating ficus species. We want to see if they help, if ingestion by birds actually improve ficus fruit germination or otherwise. So our result shows that ficus species being ingested by birds. Okay, our result shows that ficus species being ingested by birds helps in hastening germination. They help to improve germination because all the avian species that ingest ficus, all the ficus species being ingested by the avian species in our study area germinated faster than depulp and old fruit. And the mean time to seedling emergency also increased for seed that is being ingested by birds than seed that is not ingested by birds. In our results, we find out that not all bird species ingested ficus. Not all bird species in our study ingested ficus species. For example, speckled mousebird did not ingest seeds. But during the field work, we realized that they feed on ficus species and they handle ficus species, which means that perhaps if there's time to still study them, they might ingest this species, they might ingest ficus species. So germination rate of ficus seed ingested by avian frugivores in the study were significantly improved compared to depulp and old fruit. And this is inconsistent with other studies, which shows that small-sized birds, which is dark-capped bulbos, consume fewer seed than large birds. We also look at the seed retention. We also look at seed retention, and in this study, the seed retention by birds is between 12.5 to 30.8 minutes, which indicate that transit times were long enough to enhance seed germination and allow dispersal of ficus fruits away from their mother plant. Our study shows that avian ingestion plays a vital role in germination success of the respective fleshy fruits ficus species, which means that frugivores potentially will improve germination success and emergence of fig seeds, and they will also help in dispersal, promoting regeneration. So after looking at the role of avian bird ingestion on ficus species, we also look at the role of fruit bat ingestion and gut passage on seed germination success and emergence for different ficus species. We all know that Warburg epilated fruit bats helps in improving germination and emergence because of the way they handled fruits and their traveling distance. Thereby, they can help to carry fruit from one place to another, enhancing seed rain and germination process. Like we did for avian species, I don't think I mentioned that. We caged we put our fruit bat in cage for, I think, for 1 week. Then we fed the fruit bat with ficus species under 24 hours of collection. And after feeding them under 24 hours of collection, we collected their excreta and their spats, the spat seeds. Then we planted this excreta and spat seeds in greenhouse, and we observed their germination rates and seedling emergence. So for fruit bats, ingested seeds have higher germination rates than deep pulp and old fruits. So realize that for fruit bats, after ingested seed, the next higher germination rates for ficus species is deep pulped than old fruits. Perhaps maybe during the pulping of the ficus species, there might be some contamination, but we realize that old fruits have higher germination rate than deep pulp. Then we also find out that fruit bats consume substantial amounts of fruits of each of the ficus species, even than bird species that we carried out before we carried out the research for fruit bats. Then the germination rate was also significantly higher for fruit bats, and the seedling emergency was earlier for ficus fruits species ingested compared to seeds from old and deep pulp fruits. Except for Ficus lutein, we realized that for Ficus lutein, the old fruits germinated faster, and we have higher germination rates for Ficus lutein than for the seed ingested. So since fruit bats can retain seeds for a very long period of time, we predict that there will be a good seed dispersers, because they will have ability to transport seeds farther away from the mother plants and help in seed rain, they will help in seed rain, and they will also enhance restoration or germination of seeds. But beyond enhancing germination rates and speeding up the emergence of seedling, seed ingestion by fruit bat species is also important for, like I said, restoration of degraded areas, because they typically cover a relatively large area and long distance for foraging. So it is important to state that keystone ficus species contribute substantially to ecosystem biomass, providing food for birds, bats, and other mammals. And in another way, fruit bat also helps to aid the germination and emergence of the ficus species. Then to further research on fig-frugivore interaction, we use camera traps to check the visitation rate of vertebrates to ficus species. We examined the use of 5 ficus species by avian frugivores and mammals, and their potential role as seed disperser in urban land mosaic. We placed camera traps at 1 meter range of a fruiting focal ficus tree and focus on identifying the frugivores visiting and feeding on fig fruits. So the camera traps focus on each focal tree for a minimum of 3 to 21 days, and we review all the videos recorded to estimate frugivore visitation and interaction. Our camera traps, for 3,888 hours, we recorded 4,071 videos from camera traps with 10,016 visits between 3 main vertebrate taxa, which is bats, birds, and monkeys. We had 8,958 bat visits, which is the highest, followed by 808 visits by birds and 250 by monkeys. Then Ficus sarcomeras attracted the highest number of individual vertebrate visitors, followed by Ficus saw and Ficus trichopoda. Fruit bat had the highest number of ficus visits and fruit consumption across the urban mosaic landscape of the study. So you realize that for each of these ficus species, Ficus bouquet, Ficus lutein, natalensis, and sarcomeras, fruit bat has the highest frugivore visits, followed by avian species and monkeys. We also recorded Janet and Delmos for just one visitation. Then for consumption rates, fruit bat has the highest consumption also. Then birds visit, okay, like we all know, bird visits between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for all the bird visits all the ficus species between 6 to 6 p.m. and bat visits between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then monkey visit has highest visitation between 6 and 4. So this is the visitation for each ficus species, the rate of visitation for each, the rate of visitation by vertebrate frugivores for each ficus species. So as predicted, several vertebrate taxa visited fruiting ficus tree species in the urban mosaic landscape. Both species were observed to forage on fig fruits by picking insects and using twigs, then perching, while bat species feeds on flies and they carry the fruits far away. Our research shows that bats and birds and other vertebrates are important seed dispersers because they help in seed rain production and restoration projects for degraded areas. And ficus species in turn, which has mutual relationship, mutual benefits with frugivores, helps to offer numerous food resources, especially in terms of fruit scarcity. And they also helps to offer perching opportunities for foraging vertebrates. During our review and our study, we realized that there's not much studies in South Africa that research on the role of Warburg epilated fruit bats the role of Warburg epilated fruit bats with the interaction between frugivores and the interaction between fig species and Warburg epilated fruit bat compared to avian species, especially given the amount. So this is very important because of the amount of fruits being ingested by fruit bats during our studies. So that is one of the studies we recommended that we should do. In these studies, birds and harvest monkey tended to stay for prolonged periods on focal trees, whereas fruit bats approached ficus trees only briefly. We also observed higher activities in the ficus species at night than in the daytime, because bats are one of the most visitors for ficus species. So we observed that there are higher activities in the night. We conclude that native ficus tree species in our study area are ecologically important across the urban mosaic landscape because of their fruit abundance and fruiting throughout the year. So long-term monitoring of native ficus species phenology and frugivore visitation concurrently with neighboring native fruits producing trees are recommended. And ficus species are recommended for restoration and reforestation program since they attract a lot of frugivores. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much for a fantastic talk. And actually, it's interesting to see how little research has actually been done, and it'd be quite interesting to see kind of what's been done across Africa. So do feel free to pop your questions in the chat. So Alison has a question. He said, nice talk. And he said, so what were the fruiting phenology of the ficus species and the fruiting individuals in individual fig trees?
Okay, thank you so much. What are the fruiting phenology? So we realize that ficus species fruit all year round, though not individual ficus species, not individual trees fruit all year round, but you will always find a species of ficus fruiting at a particular period of time. And between ficus species ripe between 14 to 20 days. Ficus species ripe between 14 to 20 days, and they have crop size between 1,780 to 48,515. So they produce a lot of copious fruits. And the peak fruiting season of ficus is between July and August, which is between spring and summer.
And have you found that there's been, I suppose, much of a bit of a change with kind of climate change impacts as well on the fruiting? Is it kind of maybe starting a little bit later, or any changes seasonally?
Yeah, that is one of, we also want to look at that in the future research to see if climate change affects fruiting and ripening season, but obviously we think it will because of the changes in weather. But we will focus our research on finding if land use changes affect fruiting or distribution. But we realize that there are more ficus tree species in urban land use than in forest. The ficus species we find in forest are in the edges of the forest. Yeah, so there's no really significant difference. There's no much effect on urban, maybe because in our study area, most of the ficus species are being planted.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. And so Ross and Lynn had just asked, this is a very interesting talk. They said, thank you very much. Do the fruit bats ingest all the ficus seeds, or do they spit some of it out with the chewed up pulp? And if so, would that affect the germination rate? Good question.
Thank you so much. So yes, fruit bats ingested almost all, not all, but almost all of the ficus species presented to them. And most of them are spit out and some are excreted out. We find some in their poo, just very little in their poo, and most are like spitted out. And because of that, yes, it affects germination rates and it affects seedling emergence, except for Ficus lutein. Ficus lutein had ingestion by fruit bats. It's not positive when it comes to Ficus lutein because we have old fruits germinating faster than depulp and ingested. But for other ficus species, which is other natalensis, saw, and the rest, the fruit bat, the ficus species ingested by fruit bat germinated earlier, and we have higher germination rates for other species. So we still need to look at why otherwise for Ficus lutein, because for other species, we have higher germination rates and faster germination.
Yeah, And I mean, it's obviously, you know, a fantastic, you know, food source. And like you say, you know, ficus species are keystone species, and so many, you know, not only bats, you know, other species are relying on them. But I just was wondering, do you think that ficus kind of the fruits are actually preferred by bats from fig trees, or do you think it's actually that, you know, bats are using it because of the availability? Would they kind of tend to feed on other fruiting trees first, and then, or is kind of a fig kind of fruiting, is that their kind of best? Do they just love it, and that would be the first food that they go for?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good question. Which one of my reviewer also asked the same question, that is it that fruit bat did not have choice than to just feed on ficus, or did they love it? Though from our camera traps data, I think fruit bats love ficus species because we have a lot of visitation. We would have think that fruit bat did not have choice during the during when we fed during the cage research, when we just housed the fruit bat and give them ficus species, that maybe they don't have choice than to feed on ficus species. But during the camera traps research, we still find out that we have high consumption of ficus species by fruit bats and visitation by fruit bats. And seeing that ficus species have attractive colors, and research have also shows that they have nutrition, they have high nutritional benefits, like maybe fiber, or like that they have high nutritional benefits. So I would think that beyond the availability, perhaps they also love ficus species, because we have variety of ficus species. So we have the natalensis and the likes, the so I would think that beyond the availability, maybe it's also one of their dietary food, like they love to feed on it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I know certainly when I was living in Malawi and also doing fieldwork in Zambia, and actually Botswana, just the bats just absolutely love ficus species, and they're always, you know, flying around. Even when there's quite a lot of people around, they don't seem to be remotely bothered. They just want to get their food. So yeah, so they obviously do really like a lot. I guess I noticed a lot of your study sites were kind of in the sort of urban environment, and I guess, you know, it's becoming increasingly harder for bats with, you know, the built environment. And so I was just wondering if you think, certainly I know when I was living in Blantyre in Malawi, you know, quite well established gardens had quite a lot of fruit trees, like, you know, guava as well, and so we tended to see quite a lot of fruit bats actually visiting you know, gardens. So I just wondered if your researchers, if you've kind of looked at any difference between kind of, I guess, an urban and more sort of, you know, semi-urban or a more sort of natural environment.
Yeah, I looked at forest, urban,
yeah,
which different kind of urban, the urban built, that is people's houses and golf gardens. And I realized that ficus species are more in those places. So like I said, I carried out face-to-face interview to know if those ficus species are naturally grown up or being planted. So from the interview and from the information I gathered, across the urban area, most of the ficus species, they are being planted. But for the forest area, I realized that ficus species are mostly at the edges, not in the interior part of the forest area, but there's still like attraction for fruit bats. So I think they tend to find ficus species wherever it is, maybe because of the smell, like it also have this attractive odor and the color.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, I mean, one, unless anybody else has a question, if you want to pop your questions in the chat, we've got a couple more minutes, but otherwise I had quite a few questions. So I mean, one question that was actually really interesting when you said it kind of makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it, was you're saying actually that the seeds actually stay in the guts of fruit bats for longer, so they can actually travel further and dispersing further. And I suppose that's quite a big challenge with fruit bats, you know, with insectivorous bats, although it's, you know, hard to kind of, I suppose, quantify ecosystem services as such. With fruit bats, it just seems to be that much harder. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on, I suppose, kind of how to kind of, further investigate, I guess, the sort of impact on ecosystem services that fruit bats provide, because there's obviously a lot of negativity with fruit bats eating fruits, even though they're eating them when it's quite ripe. But actually, I mean, have you found that's been much of a conflict with people and trying to sort of say how important also bats are for ecosystem services?
Yeah. Looking at the ecosystem services provided by fruit bats, when it comes to feeding on ficus species and helping with forest restoration and like potentially helping with seed rain, there are a lot of positive vibes there, because fruit bats, from our study and from other studies on plants fruit bat interaction, we realize that fruit bat helps to, even the insectivorous bat, but now the fruit bat, they helps to eat, they helps in dispersals. Because like I said earlier, even when we were doing for the seed retention time, we find out that fruit bats could keep the seeds in their gut for longer period than other species that we use. They could keep the seeds longer period. And when we look at the benefit of keeping these seeds for longer period in the wild, that means, and seeing that fruit bat travel like far away. So we realize that fruit bat travel long distance. It could be like, we could tell people that the only thing they're seeing, people that have negative perception on fruit bat, that fruit bat can help in spreading of your seeds, especially people like farmers. They can help to spread your seeds and they can help to disperse them. And they will also help in seeing that our results shows that the injection of fruit bats, the injection of ficus species by fruit bats helps to break seed dormancy and helps to enhance germination rate. So it means that when you have fruit bat around your farm, there will be increase in your yield, because they will help to spread your seeds and enhance germination.
Great, thank you very much. So we don't have any, sorry, we do have a question. So Michael's just asking, do they eat avocados and mangoes?
I think they feed on mangoes. I'm not sure of avocados, but I've seen fruit bats feeding on mangoes. And
I guess one last question from me. I was actually wondering if you could tell us about your new postdoc and what you're going to be doing.
Okay, thank you. So I will be working with different collaborators. So we'll be, for the postdoc, we'll be looking at using community science method, or also called citizen science method, to survey birds and check their diversity in urban area. Like we all know, like urbanization has come to stay. We just need to look for how to still preserve and conserve bird diversity even in urban area. So we will be, but in this research, we'll be collaborating with the indigenous. We want to adopt the community participatory method, where the indigene of the community will be recruited and they will be trained to love birds and carry out this research themselves. And the aim of this project is to help people to love nature, to help people to love biodiversity, to help people to see reason why we need to conserve this biodiversity. So we'll be using citizen science method to collect data on bird diversity, and we will also recruit a lot of the indigenous in doing this.
Gosh, that sounds fantastic. Very, very exciting. So yeah, congratulations on your new role. That sounds really great. And thank you very, very much for coming along today, and thank you to all of the participants for joining as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you all for joining.
Take care. Bye, everybody.